Growing. Mm. Growing. Okay. Train transform between. Okay. Mm.
Welcome aboard, everybody. I should be working now, I hope. It's another wonderful week, and we are getting ready to be learning Hashem's Torah. It's our three-step program, what we're looking for. I should be working now. It's another wonderful week, and we are getting ready to be learning Hashem's Torah. It's our three-step program, what we're looking for. That was better. Okay. Hearing myself, it's cringy. We are going to be talking about, first of all, what's going on in the calendar. Second of all, we're going to be talking about what's happening this week in the Parsha. And from there, we will go to one practical, relevant life message that we want to take with us from this week's Parsha to be able to empower us to do what we need to be doing to make Mashiach our reality and to be living that way all day, every day. So what is going on this week in the calendar? If anyone feels everyone feels comfortable, not uncomfortable, if anyone feels comfortable unmuting yourself, please share with us what you know is going on this week in the calendar. Please only share nice things, uplifting things, and things that will make us inspired. Talk to us, please.
Isn't there a wonderful wedding taking place this week? The most wonderful chasna that everybody wants to say mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov to everybody in the family.
Thank you so much. I am actually amazed. I'm touched that you remember this. And yes, it's a very, very big simcha. We are super grateful to Hashem, especially because it's a local Manchester wedding. It's brilliant to be able to be a mechutim from both sides. We're both locals and we're celebrating. What's the joke about the fellow who wanted to get a free meal? So he went to the local hall to get a free dinner and he didn't realize, but it was a bar mitzvah, a very lavish bar mitzvah. He sits down to have some food. Someone comes over to him and says, "Oh, you related?" He said, "No, yeah. I'm a mechutin from both sides, from the chassan and the kala." He didn't realize it was a bar mitzvah. But yes, we have a local wedding, and we are very grateful to Hashem. It's going to be Rez Hashem on Wednesday. Hashem, there should be a binyan adiyat. That's one big event that's going on this week locally, and simchas for Yidden. Another big thing is that we mentioned. We mentioned last week because it took place yesterday, but it's a big day on the calendar, which is the Chamisha Asa, the 15th day of Sivan. We mentioned it was the day that the beginning of the Yud Beis Tammuz story started to play itself out in the open. It started off in a very worrying, scary way, and that the Frierdiker Rebbe was actually arrested on the 15th day of Sivan, which was yesterday. It was also the day that he instructed our Rebbe, his son-in-law, not through him directly, but through the Rebbitzin Chaim Mishka called out the window to say we have guests, and that started an immediate, enormous reaction of tremendous international lobbying and pressure and creating all sorts of good forces that managed to achieve miracles of miracles. The Frierdiker was set free to the astonishment of everybody and a tremendous nace. And the Frierdiker would often talk about this event, and the Rebbe made sure to commemorate not just the end of the story, but the middle and the beginning of the story as well. Because it's important for us to remember that whilst the story was taking place, as the Chassidim behind the Iron Curtain found out the news that the Frierdiker Rebbe had been arrested, it was so devastating. It was so worrying. It was so scary. Everything seemed to be going wrong, from bad to worse. And what they didn't realize was that everything was part of a master plan, or maybe they did realize, but it was very hard to put themselves into that place. And we want to tell ourselves and talk to ourselves that when things look like they're falling apart, really they aren't. Really they're heading in the right direction. It doesn't mean we shouldn't daven. It does mean we should tell Hashem what we need, and we should speak up and we speak loud and clear to Hashem, but we shouldn't give up. We shouldn't despair. Instead, we should continue doing what we can do, whatever that might entail, including looking after ourselves, our emotional health, including looking after what our needs are, but at the same time, having absolute confidence that the good news is on its way. Mitzvah Hashem, we should see all the Tov, Hanidav, and Nigla across the board. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in Parshas Bahalosecha. In Bahalosecha, it's a very special parsha. I think we've mentioned a few times here that in Parshas Bahalosecha, we actually discover, according to one of the counts, we know there are Chamisha Chumshei Torah, 5 books of the Torah. In Chazal, there are a couple of mentions of 7 books. And how would you end up having 7 books if you realize that Parshas Bahalosecha is one of those parshas that has in it a break in the middle of the parsha? And in this break, it is unique in the sense that the break in the 6th parsha is between the beginning and the end. In other words, making it to 3 parts within one parsha. Which break are we talking about? In the middle of this week's parsha, we have the upside down nuns. And the upside down nuns are before and after the psukim of Yehi ben Aaron. And Yehi ben Aaron is the psukim that talk about the Aaron traveling. And we are told, Rashi tells us, the reason why the upside down nuns are there is in order to divide between the beginning and the end of the parsha. Rashi points out it's because there was too much non-positive going on. But according to that count, it's actually the end of Sefer number 4 is the beginning of this week's parsha. The Yehi ben Aaron would then be counted as Sefer number 5. And the end of Parshas Bahalosecha till the end of Bamidbar will be Parsha Sefer number 6, which means that the Sefer Devarim then becomes Sefer number 7. And according to that count, that would be how you would end up having 7 Sfarim. What it does tell us is that that Parshas Bahalosecha is a very important book in the Torah. And Parshas Bahalosecha itself, even though it's just a parsha, carries with it a very lot of different elements to it. And as we read through the parsha, we're going to discover that actually we can notice some of those major parts that are there. The computer's playing games, but we're not going to notice the games. We're going to focus away from the games. Instead, we're going to talk about what's going on in Parshas Bahalosecha. The beginning of the parsha, the name of the parsha, the word, the choice of the word that the parsha is named after, Bahalosecha, literally translates that when you will light up the menorah. What does it mean to light up the menorah? To light up the menorah is because obviously when you light, things go up, the flame goes up, but more specifically because the lighting of the menorah in our case had to be in such a way where it was uplifted, pointing upwards. In which way? Says Rashi that the menorah had to be lit to the extent that the flame that was lit would be flickering and burning on its own. There was a mitzvah for Aaron HaKohen when he lit the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash. He shouldn't just put the fire to it and make sure there was fire there. He had to wait until the wick of the menorah flame would be burning properly on its own and not need continuous input. It didn't have to jumpstart itself. And that's an important lesson in itself. Bahalosecha and lighting up the menorah. But particularly, we're going to talk about the choice of wording. If you had to say to light in Hebrew, which word comes to mind?
Lahadlik.
There you go. Shkoyach. If you say the bracha on lighting candles on Shabbos, you say that word. Lahadlik ner shel Shabbos. Kodesh. And the word lahadlik actually means to light. But ha'aloischa is a different word. When you are ma'aleh, if you lift up, and it's not unique to fire, and it's almost not a word that's generally used for fire. Burning up something is not necessarily a word you use for lighting a candle. But the choice is specific because it's telling us something about Aaron and his service, and that is that Aaron HaKohen's job was very important to make sure that the people around him were finding their own flame lifted up. And that's really the job of everybody who takes on Aaron's mission. And we're told in the mission to learn from Aaron, and that is to look around and see who needs a lift, a boost, pick me up. And that's our Aaron move to be able to help things flicker and flame. And if we take on what Rashi told us, that the way Aaron would light the fire wasn't just to share an inspiration, hit and run, drop it and leave it. Instead, he would stick around until the person who was being inspired was so uplifted that they in turn were now ready to share that inspiration onwards and keep it going from there to the next person. and thereby creating a domino effect where one lights up the next, lights up the next. Why is it
Mm.
connected? And how does the parsha start off with the story? The Rashi also tells us this that Bahalosecha, now we're learning about lighting the menorah because this is a follow-on from last week's Sedra. Last week,
Mm.
said we finished reading the inauguration gifts of the 12 Shvatim. And we know there are 12 tribes, starting off with the Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, Zvulun. But actually, if you read through the list, there's no Levi in the list. Shevet Levi doesn't bring an inauguration set of Korbanos. And had you have 12 tribes, if you miss out Levi, and the answer is because Yosef is often counted as two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. So if you take out Levi but split Yosef, you're back to 12 numbers, and that's the end of last week's Sedra. Each one of the 12 Shvatim bring their inauguration Karbanis. What happens to Shevet Levi? They've been singled out. They've been singled out to the people of service. And Aaron HaKohen, who's the leader of Shevet Levi, looks on and says, wow, 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 12 times wow. Each day, the inauguration, they're bringing in the brand new concept of a home for Hashem, where all the karbanos and the closeness and connection is being driven through this home, and each shevet finds its unique starting point. And Aaron said, what am I doing? Where am I? Where is our shevet in all this? And of course, Moshe tells Aaron, you have nothing to worry about, because what they're doing is a one-off, and what you're doing is going to be bringing the light to all the people from now and forever. And this is Shevet Levi's message to us again, that our job isn't to do a one-off. Instead, we try Bahalosecha to be the lamp lighters for now and for always. Mitzvah Hashem, we should have the koyach to do that. What the parsha then continues right after Bahalosecha is the continuation of Shevet Levi's role, and that is besides for being nominated, which we learned about last week, we also learned this week the inauguration of Shevet Levi, which was a very specific process, a process that included bringing karbanos for each one of the Leviim that were going to be in service. If you remember last week, we counted of which Leviim are between the age of 30 and 50. And those Leviim were counted and matched a Levi for a Bechor. And there was a short short amount of missing amount of Leviim, and therefore some of the Bechors had to do pidyon Bechor. But that's when they were nominated. And this week we read how they had to bring karbanis, and those karbanis also had to have tenufa, the waving of the offering. And then we find that it had to be the Leviim themselves, the service people themselves had to go through a process of becoming dedicated to Hashem, which included a complete shave of all bodily hair, as well as Aaron HaKohen would have to lift, almost like an offering, and wave to the six directions, each one of the individual Levium of service. And all that's recorded in this week's Sedra. Fascinating, the Torah points out that each one of the Levium allowed themselves to have this full process, even though it probably would have been uncomfortable. We know later on in the Sedra, there's actually a reference to where it wasn't comfortable. Korach complains about it. And Aaron had to do literally lifting one by one, each one of the Levium, the 3,000 plus Levium, had to be lifted by Aaron HaKohen, and all that was in order to inaugurate the Levium into their work. We then also learn in a few brief psukim that unlike the Kohanim that could not have a moment blemish, their disqualification was very high bar. They had to be in full bodily fit and in full no disqualifications. The Levium had much less, a lower bar. The only thing that we are told that they had to have was to be of age. And in particular, from the age of 25 for 5 years, they would undergo training from the age of 25 till the age of 30. It was considered part of the service in some way, but it was, from the age of 25 to age of 30, it was training, and the age of 30 till 50, there would be a service. And once they reached the age of 50, they could be as able as ever or less able. It makes a difference. They're no longer of age. That is going to be their disqualification. And they can no longer do the main avodas of the Levi. Instead, they can become the support team, like opening and closing the gates, helping out with the moving stuff. But the tribe of Levi had to be in that particular age bracket in order to be of age. We now have that we have the inauguration of the Mishkan, Chodesh Nisan, first, second, or 12th of Chodesh Nisan. We've learned about Bahalosecha, Aaron is lighting menorah. We've learned that the Leviim have been nominated, have been switched on, have been inaugurated. And now we learn that the first Pesach in the desert, which was very short after what we just read in the Parshah. We just read in the end of last week's Parshah that from the first to the 12th day of Nisan, each day there was the new inauguration of the Mishkan. Well, after the 12th of Nisan comes the 13th and then the 14th day of Nisan. And we learn that on the 14th day of Nisan, which on the regular calendar is Erev Pesach, this was the first Erev anniversary of the Yiddish people actually leaving Mitzrayim. And although the rule was that they did Pesach before they left Mitzrayim, and the next Pesach was scheduled to take place in the Holy Land of Eretz Yisrael, that was the plan. We would leave Mitzrayim, we'd go to Eretz Yisrael, and we'd do the Carbon Pesach every year thereafter. We weren't in Eretz Yisrael yet, though. We were still at Mount Sinai. Hashem says, we're going to make an override, an exception to the rule. We're going to do a Carbon Pesach in the desert. Dun-dun-dun-dun. How exciting. We're going to have the first anniversary of becoming people, and the Yiddish people are going to have a Seder as free people. It was the first time in history where the Yiddish people had a Pesach Seder in freedom. They were in the desert, living in tents, but they had a Seder night. And part of the Seder was that on the 14th day of Nisan, they had to bring a Carbon Pesach and shecht it in the brand new Mishkan. And that would be the first time they did the Carbon Pesach and everything outside of Mitzrayim. They weren't in Israel yet, but it was going to be the exception to the rule. Very exciting. Very exciting, except for the group of people who, under Moshe's strict instruction, had been involved in carrying and handling people who were passed on, dead corpse, and therefore they themselves were not pure with tummy. And it would take a week for them to be able to have the paraduma process, which is a 7-day process, in order for them to come to her. And the 7-day process would end just short of enough time for them to join in the Seder night. Now, happens to be that if you miss the Seder night, it's gone. Because the next morning, there's no more Seder. You can say the second night Seder. There was no second night Seder in those days. So these people get caught out and they turn around to Moshe and they say, Moshe, we are Tamei. We're not ritually pure. Why should we miss out? We've been following what you've told us to do. We've been doing the right thing. It's just not right. This is so important. This is celebrating Yetzias Mitzrayim. How can we miss out on this? And Moshe Rabbeinu says to them, I hear you. Let me check with the boss. And he picks up his direct dial to Hashem. And he says, Rabbeinu Shalom, this is what the boys are saying. This is what the lads want. And Hashem says to Moshe, tell them they win. They win. They've established a brand new mitzvah. They're so keen to get involved. I'm going to give it to them, and they get a brand new invention called Pesach Sheni. Second Pesach, it won't be now, it'll be in a month from now, and it's going to take place on the 14th day of Iyar, so 1 month later. And on the 14th day of Iyar, they'll bring the second Karban Pesach. On that night, on the 15th, they'll eat it, and they will fulfill their mitzvah of Karban Pesach 1 month out after the anniversary. Says Hashem, it's not just for now. And it's not just for them. For all eternity, for the years to come, generations to come, anyone who was in a place that they were unable to bring the first Pesach, even if it was on purpose, even if there's no one else to blame but themselves, they now have a second chance, Pesach Sheni. And just to say, this Pesach Sheni element, the Rebbe used every opportunity to discuss and to point out and read and talk about it again and again and again. Almost like Pesach Sheni is one of the most important mitzvahs of our generation. And we're going to talk about it today. This is one of the mitzvahs that we read in this week's Parshah. Right after we read about Pesach Sheni, which, as we said, was on the 14th day of the second month of Iyar, what happens next is that on the 20th day of Iyar, just a week later, it's going to be the first time that people are going to journey after receiving the Torah. Almost an entire year from Shavuos all the way around the calendar. They've passed Pesach. They've passed Pesach Sheni. On the 20th day of Iyar, they're going to leave Har Sinai. So here the Torah describes, first of all, what it was like to live at Har Sinai and to know that any moment it would be time to go. It took a long moment. It took almost a year. And how are we going to know when it's time to pack your bags and go? It's always temporary. Who's going to decide and what's it going to be based off? Hashem is going to decide and he's going to show us a straightforward sign. There's a cloud that hangs above the Mishkan, the house of Hashem. When that cloud lifts, that's the signal. When the cloud of Hashem's glory lifts from upon the Mishkan, that's a sign it's time to pack your bags and go. And it can happen any day. It can happen after one day of camping, of 2 days, after a month, after a year, after a few years. Whenever the cloud lifts, that's the time to go. And then Hashem says also, we're going to make, and they did make, trumpets, which would be not the siren, the bell, the signals, the trumpets. And the trumpets will be the signals that will tell us when it's time to travel. So when the cloud lifts, Moshe would instruct the trumpet blowers to blow the trumpets with the correct signal that it's time for everyone to go home and pack your bags because we are the traveling Jews and we're going to be traveling. In addition to that, the trumpets are also going to be used, not when it's time to travel, but if Moshe is calling together all the elders and there's an important meeting, that would be one signal. If everybody has to come because it's a national gathering and an assembly of all the people, there was a different signal. There was also the same trumpets would be used if it was a call of war, would be used the same trumpets would be used. They would also be used on festive holidays, on Rosh Chodesh, and also be used together with Karbanis. It happens to be, this is one of the songs that in this week's Parsha, that's about the trumpets, that would be blown on festive occasions. And then we have the very first journey, and we learn about the formation in which the Yiddish people were to travel through the desert. Everybody had to be in the right place, together with their tribe and their flag and their color code. And the whole formation would travel along in the desert. And it was also very specific about which tribe would go first, and when the Mishkan that was taken apart would move along to make sure that it was done in exactly the right way, so that it was taken down by Kavadik in a respectful way, and it would be rebuilt wherever the destination was in the respectful way, so that the vessels would never be exposed unnecessarily, and the building, which we had done in a very organized way, very efficient way, the Shevet, Levi, Gershon, Kohath, Merari, each one of them doing their share, their part, together with the Kohanim to make sure it was done as smoothly as possible. We actually have, right here is where the two nuns appear. We just learned that the Yiddish people left on their first journey away from Har Sinai. And Rashi points out that this was a problem because when we left Har Sinai, the atmosphere, the feeling was, oh, finally, let's get out of here. And that was not okay because Har Sinai had given us the gift of our lifetime, the gift of eternity, the Torah. And to be running away as if we can't wait to get out of here, that wasn't okay. But the Aaron traveled and led this journey. What's the Aaron? The Aaron is the Holy Ark. And the Aaron would go out and make sure that the path ahead would be safe, smooth, and it should be user-friendly. It should be traveling friendly for the Yiddish people as they would travel through. After the heaping Aaron, we have the other upside down nun, and then we have a whole bunch of complaints and rebukes that the Yiddish people, unfortunately, are also a little famous for. When we get into moaning mode and we complain about what's going on, it's already from the beginning. The first rebuke that we get is when the Yiddish people start complaining, we're so tired of journeying, this is so hard, it's such a waste of time, where are we going? That sort of complaint wasn't a request for things to get easier, but it was a way of finding anything that turned into an issue, and Hashem was very upset. And a fire breaks out amongst the people, and people start passing away until Moshe Rabbeinu davens and stops that plague. And shortly afterwards, we read about how the second rebuke and complaint, which was about the man. Hashem had been giving the Yiddish people food in the desert, manna falling from heaven. It was like miracles of miracles. Unbelievable to have food follow you, delivered to your door. It's just next level. But the Yiddish people complained that they don't have any inflation, they don't have meat. It was a non-legitimate complaint at all. First of all, because the man was extremely satisfying and nutritious, I should say, and also because they had their own cattle. They could have found themselves meat. But if Hashem's providing and is delivering food, why doesn't he deliver a better menu? And this was very, very out of line. Very out of line. And unfortunately, the Yiddish people were told by Moshe that it was out of line and they did not listen. Moshe Rabbeinu talks to Hashem and he says, how can he even ever provide enough food for such complaints and such complainers? And Moshe Rabbeinu was very upset. And what happens next is that Moshe Rabbeinu is told by Hashem that it's time for him to appoint 70 elders who will be his support team. Now, if there's 12 tribes and you try and divide 70 by 12, it doesn't really work. 72 would be 6 per tribe. So he was going to get 6 elders, 6 from each tribe, which would make 72, and 70 of them would become the elders, and 2 would be counted out. So they did a girdle. Each tribe appointed their 6 best, and 2 fellas who were not Zoicha B'Girdle didn't win. One was called Eldad, and one was called Medad. All the other 70 went out with Moshe. Moshe had moved his tent out of the camp because he was very upset at how the Yiddish people were behaving. And Moshe and the elders who were nominated went out and was prophesying with Moshe. Turns out that Eldad and Medad were still in the camp because they had been non-nominees or non-nominated, and they started prophesying themselves. And what they said was that Yeshua, who was Moshe Rabbeinu's prime Talmud, would be his successor. But he'd be his successor in the fact that he would be the one who would bring the Yiddish people into Eretz Yisrael because Moshe was not going to make it in. And Yeshua hears them talking about him doing what Moshe dreamt of doing, was furious. And he says to Moshe, Moshe, how can you let them talk like this? Adoni Moshe Kloim. Finish them off. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, what? These people are so holy. Hashem is communicating with them the prophecy. Halavai, if only everybody would have this type of level that every year should be prophets. Turns out that Eldon and Medad also became prophets, and there were 72 prophets in the end. But the end of the story is that the Yiddish people got meat. How did Hashem provide meat? In the form of quail, small fat bird that came at a very low altitude where it was so easy to grab. And unfortunately, the Yiddish people took more and more meat until it literally killed them. And the Yiddish people learned that actually complaining sounds good while you're doing it, but a little bit of objectivity realized that it's really not the way forward. The end of the parasha mentions that Miriam had been talking to Aaron and discussing that these elders who are now become prophets had discussed, had been discussing together with their wives, that it was unfortunate for their wives that they will now abstain and separate themselves because Tzipora, Moshe's wife, had experienced that sort of thing since Moshe had been so connected to Hashem and Hashem had been thinking all the time. Moshe Rabbeinu had separated from Tzipora, and they were worried that maybe that's what would happen to the other elders. And they, Aaron and Miriam, were discussing why Moshe would have separated from Tzipora, considering that they also were prophets and Hashem also spoke to them. They didn't have to separate from the ways of the world and separate from their spouse. And they said things challenging Moshe's righteousness, and that was enough. In 1 second, Hashem demonstrated to Moshe and to Aaron and to Miriam that Moshe Rabbeinu was extremely correct in what he was doing. And the way he did that was he appeared to Aaron and Miriam by surprise. Whereas most prophets have to get into the right frame of mind, Moshe Rabbeinu had a direct line. Short of it is that Miriam, who had said the words that were borderline Lashon Hara, was enough to get her stricken with Tzora'as. As you remember, we learned in Tazriyah and Torah, leprosy-like skin condition that you don't go to the doctor for. Instead, you go to the kohen for. And Aaron turns to Moshe and he says, Moshe, your sister doesn't have a kohen option because we are all related and we can't help her. You better daven for her that she doesn't have the teras. And Hashem weighs it. And Moshe Rabbeinu davens to Hashem, and Hashem tells him, don't worry, she'll stay outside the camp. And the whole camp waits. Everything's put on hold for Miriam. And we learn that this is a recognition for the time that Miriam waited for Moshe when he was a little baby in the basket. In this case, in the end of the Sedra, the entire Yiddish people who follow Moshe waited for Miriam until she was healed after 7 days. And that's how the Parsha ends. A very loaded Parsha, as you can see. So, after this long summary of the Parsha, I got sidetracked and carried away, but it's an exciting Parsha. Let's talk about one practical, relevant life message that we take from the Parsha. And you better believe we are going to be focusing on Pesach Sheni, which, as we said, is a message for our generation. It's so important to remind ourselves that we always have a second chance. We always have a second chance. Now, we talk about it when we talk about this week's Parshah, Bahalosecha. We talk about it when it comes to Pesach Sheni on the calendar, and we talk about it every year. So what else can we discuss about Pesach Sheni that's fresh, new, and it's going to give us a perspective? But trust me, the Rebbe always has another sicha that will give us another fresh angle. If I'm not mistaken, this is something that we have not discussed in all the years that we're doing this Yorim. So get ready for a Chelik Lamed Gimel. It's a great sicha, and let's learn it inside. Let's start off, though, with a question for discussion, which asks the following. Please unmute if you're feeling confident. In spiritual growth, should we focus more on abstaining from negative behaviors or on actively increasing goodness and positivity? And the follow-up question is, does one approach need to take priority over the other? Is there one that's more important? And if there is, which one is it?
Hmm,
Seems interesting.
that's a good one.
Please close the door.
Hmm.
Any votes for no priority? They're both equally important. Because that will cancel the first question.
It's a strange question. A very strange question.
I'm going to rephrase the question for a moment and say, do you ever feel more drawn towards stopping bad behaviors versus starting new good resolutions, or the other way around? Do you find yourself taking on new resolutions quicker than stopping bad habits? Personal question. Oof,
Gosh.
it's not loud.
Would it be in taking on the new positive behavior that you find that the bad behavior drops away?
Oh, you are so a chassid of the Rebbe. Fantastic. Yeah, but let's say that's one argument. I mean, arguably, it doesn't always work. Let's just give you an example, by an extreme example. Let's just say I'm addicted to alcohol.
Mm,
If
yeah.
I'm going to start drinking a lot of apple juice and making sure I do all sorts of good habits, is that really going to get rid of my addiction? I think not.
But that's the chemical thing. I think when you're talking about increasing goodness and positivity, aren't we talking more in action and in more spiritual things like taking on maybe more mitzvahs or more prayer or things like that? I don't know.
Also,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to try and imagine both those conversations running on the same tracks. Because our spiritual journey, our spiritual self-improvement
Mm.
parallels and is often very much connected to our behavior in what you might call just regular, mundane, secular, or just bodily needs. And we're going to learn that actually we have one neshama, we have one body, and it's a streamlined exercise. But yes, I take on board very much so that when it comes to spirituality, it's easier for us to imagine that the spiritual goodness will somehow outweigh and eradicate bad habits. It's true, but it's not obvious. I'm going
Do
to
we?
suggest that actually in many Yiddish sources, that's not a given. But I'm not arguing because I think the rabbi would very much agree with you. So bear with me. Don't run away now. Anyone else want to weigh in on this? Because we're going to flick the slide.
Yeah. Do you
Please.
abstain from negative behavior? Would you need somebody to point out that you have negative behavior before you can abstain from it because you didn't realize that you had it? In which case, then you could go on to increase goodness and positivity.
Interesting. Very interesting. Fascinating. So even becoming aware of it is the first step. Or someone making me aware and then me being ready to accept that this is something I need to work on. And that's even before I start working on it. Yeah, interesting. But let's just say if I'm getting angry often, then first of all, I got to notice. Someone has to tell me, that was you getting angry again.
Mm.
And it seems to be recurring. And I've got to be willing to say, actually, you know what? I take that on board. And then what happens? Do I have to stop getting angry before I can start being extra kind and giving? Or
No, you have to realize why you're getting angry in the first place.
Exactly.
Because you may not, you don't know why you're getting angry. It's only other people that can see it. In some
yeah,
ways, when you increase goodness and positivity, you yourself will feel better about that, but that may not be noticed by people around you. So you could do that beautifully, but it wouldn't necessarily be noticed. As with negative or bad behavior, that is very noticeable to people.
Yes.
interesting, fascinating. Wow. Okay. Okay. Let's hold these thoughts and let's see what the Rebbe is going to teach us about Pesach Sheni. And actually, what we're going to learn is that yes, there is a back door, as in an override, but ideally it should be first erasing and stopping
Mm.
hurting people or bad behaviors or hurting myself, and that's crucial. And then after that, build and keep on growing. And it should be gradual. It should be in that order. There are times when we have to do it backwards and we have to jumpstart the process by starting to do good things. But it's super important to not have bad habits and also grow. So they both have a priority and they're not one more than the other, let's say. So in this example, we are introduced to a second Pesach. For those who missed the first Pesach offering, we did a lot of talking about this. Let's read it in the Psukim. The Pasuk says, and Moshe spoke to the children of Israel, instructing them to make the Pesach sacrifice. So they made the Pesach sacrifice in the first month, in the afternoon, the 14th day of the month, in the Sinai desert, according to all that Hashem had commanded Moshe. So the children of Israel did, so did the children do. Notice how he throws in that it was in the Sinai desert, because as we said, it was a big deal to do it in the Sinai desert. It wasn't part of Plan A. Plan A was that we do it just in Eretz Yisrael. Okay? Verse 6, there were men who were ritually unclean because of contact with a dead person and therefore could not make the Pesach sacrifice on the day. So they approached Moshe and Aaron on that day. And those men said to him, we are ritually unclean because of contact with a dead person, but why should we be excluded so as not to bring the offering to Hashem in its appointed time with all the children of Israel? Notice how exciting it was for all the people to be bringing the first carbon Pesach as free people, and they're missing out on the whole thing, FOMO. And Moshe said to them, wait, and I will hear what the Lord instructs concerning you. Direct line. Wait right here, and I'm going to have an answer from Hashem, I'm telling you. Unbelievable how Moshe Rabbeinu is that close and such an open connection. So what does he come back with? And Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, any person who comes unclean from the contact with the dead or is in a distant journey, whether among you or in the future generations, they shall make a Pesach sacrifice for Hashem. Notice how extended not just from someone who's impure, but it also includes now somebody who's out of town. And it's not just for today, it's also for future generations. And it's not because they made a mistake. They were out of the area, that's enough. In the second month, on the 14th day, on the afternoon, they shall make it. You shall eat it with unleavened cakes and bitter herbs. So you're going to have matzah and maror together with the Pesach Sheni. They shall not leave over anything from it, no, sir, until the next morning, and they shall not break in any of its bones. They shall make it in accordance with all the statutes according connected with the Pesach offerings sacrifice. So all the halachas of the actual carbon Pesach would mirror the halachas of the original Korban Pesach. Pesach Sheni is going to be very much similar to Pesach Rishon. Hashem tells Moshe to give them another chance. How amazing. How tremendous. But, says Rashi, it's very similar. At the same time, it's very different. The most glaring difference between Pesach Sheni, the second Pesach, and the first Pesach is, on the second Passover, one may keep both leavened bread and unleavened food in the home. You know Pesach cleaning for Pesach Sheni. You can keep chametz in your house, and there is no festival. It's not even a Yom Tov. You can drive, you can come, you can have music, you can do it on Zoom, you can have whatever you need. The consumption of chametz is not forbidden except when one eats the sacrifice. So with the actual Korban Pesach, you got to have matzah, maror, and Korban Pesach. No chametz in the sandwich. No chametz in that lafa wrapped up in a roasted, good, fantastic lamb chops with bitter herbs. But you can have it on the Seder table, and you can have it around the house, no problem. So here we go. Some of it is same, some of it is different. Here is the Rambam that describes it in the halacha. What are the differences between the first Paschal lamb sacrifice and the second Paschal lamb sacrifice? At the time of in the first Pesach, chametz is forbidden to be seen or possessed in one's domain. It may not be slaughtered while one is in possession of chametz. You can't even bring the Korban Pesach if there's chametz at home, which is why we have to clean up our house before midday on Erev Pesach, because that's the time to bring the Korban Pesach. And the ban on chametz at home doesn't start from Pesach. It starts from the time to bring the Korban Pesach in the first month. Its meat may not be removed from the company in which it was designated to be eaten. Halal must be recited when it's eaten. A festive offering is brought with it. The chagiga has to also come together with the Korban Pesach because it's a Yom Tov. It may be brought in a state of impurity if the majority of the people are impure. So if all of the Jewish people had nationally, let's say there was a war, God forbid, and everybody had come in contact with dead people, should they keep first Pesach or second? Because most of the Jews are Tomei, they still bring the Korban Pesach in the first month, Betuma, as impure people. You don't push off the entire first Pesach. Only if it's the exception do they get a second chance. Otherwise, they all do it in the first month because of the contact of the human corpse, as we explained. With regards to the second Pesach offering, by contrast, first of all, both chametz and matzah may be possessed by the person at home. Number two, there's no halal. Halal is not recycled while eating it. Number three, it may be taken out of the company which was designated to be eaten. You don't have to have designated groups, which was your Seder night, didn't have to be so rigid. In the first Pesach, you got to sign up to a Seder, and you got to show up to the right Seder. You can't go to the wrong Seder. A festive offering is not brought with it. There's no chagiga. And it may not be brought in a state of impurity if the Jewish people are all Tomei for Pesach Sheni, you will not bring it Petuma. Both are alike, but first and second are similar in that the offering name supersedes the Shabbos prohibitions. You could bring a Korban Pesach on Shabbos. Halal is recited not when you're eating it, but when you offer it in the Beis Hamikdash, and they are eaten roasted in one house together with matzah and bitter herbs. So you do have to roast both Korban Pesachs, and you do need to have matzah and maror with it. In neither instances may the meat be left over until the morning, nor may their bones be broken. You're not allowed to have any meat left over. Make sure you've got a good group, because you've got to finish the entire animal before the end of that night, and you're not allowed to break any bones on the animal. Okay, so here's the comparison. First Pesach compared to second Pesach. Chametz is forbidden versus chametz allowed. Halal is recited when eating at the Seder night, and halal is not recited while eating in the second Seder, in the second Pesach. It's a Yom Tov, and therefore it's Chagiga in the first Yom Tov. It's not a Yom Tov in the second Pesach, and therefore there's no Chagiga bar carbon. And the first Pesach can be brought if the whole Klal Yisrael is impure, compared to the second, that cannot be. Where are we going with this? Here's the question. Today, in nowadays, until the Beis Hamikdash comes by, we have mentioned that it's a minor holiday to have Pesach Sheni. And we treat Pesach Sheni as an important day in the Jewish calendar. It's marked on your calendar. And more important, there's some halachas that apply to Yud Dalet Iyar. Number one, the most halachically relevant one, is that there is a ban on doing tachnun, no confessional prayer. The accepted custom is not to recite the tachnun prayer on the 14th day, as is a little Pesach. It's Pischa Zeira, and tachnun doesn't fit for a day of celebration. What's the celebration? The second Pesach. We are celebrating the second Pesach. Moreover, there's also a minhag that we should eat matzah. People of scrupulous are accustomed to eating matzah on the 14th day of 14th of Iyar to commemorate the second Pesach. And here is, you have a quote from the Darkei Chaim Shalom, where he mentions that there was a minhag by Reb Chaim Eliezer Shapira of Munkach, where he'd make sure to eat matzah, and he would eat the matzah at the end of Pesach Sheni, as in the night that followed, to commemorate the time where they would eat the second Pesach. Here's the Gemara in Chagiga. With regard to one who did not celebrate bringing the Pesach offering on the first day of the Pesach Sukkot, may say that bringing it. Oh, 1 second. We're already up to the question. The question is, this is the quote. I'm not sure why there's no slide for this, but let's just say, up until this slide, up to here, we've described that Pesach Sheni is a big day in our calendar. The problem we have is the Pesach Sheni doesn't make sense to mention in today's day and age. We've just described that Pesach Sheni is for those people who missed Pesach Rishon. Well, none of us missed Pesach Rishon because we don't have a Beis Hamikdash. So there is no makeup, and Pesach Sheni really doesn't have any place. I mean, we can commemorate leaving Egypt, even though we don't have the Karban Pesach. We wish you had a Karban Pesach, but how are we commemorating, making up for a missed Karban Pesach Rishon, if we don't even have the Beis Hamikdash? And the way he describes the questions as follows: why isn't the opportunity to make makeup given right? Oh. Why doesn't the second Pesach fully mirror, and it's a start of the second Pesach, not those who missed the first? So why is the second Pesach missing mark today? I've just given you the third question. This first two questions are from this Gemara in Yerushalmi, a Gemara in Chagiga. Let's read the Gemara in Chagiga, and then that's the two first questions. With regard to one who did not celebrate by bringing the festival peace offering on the first day of the festival of Sukkot, they may celebrate and bring it during the entire remaining day of the pilgrimage festival, and even find out the festival when it comes to Sukkot, where we are told every Jewish person who is able should go and make their way up to the Beis Hamikdash and celebrate Sukkot in Yerushalayim. One of the mitzvahs would be that they would bring a carbon chagiga, or the re'iyah, they would bring a carbon in the Beis Hamikdash. Now, on the first day of Sukkot, it wouldn't be possible for everyone to bring the carbon, and therefore, for all the days of Chol HaMoed of Sukkot, people would be bringing those carbons to make up for the missed carbon that they didn't bring on the first day. No, I'm talking about the Yom Tov of Sukkot, not of Pesach. Why am I telling this? Because here you have a mitzvah that tells us that if you missed the first day, you can make up for it on the second day, third day, fourth day, all the days of Chol HaMoed. And here the concept of a second chance is built into halacha right here in the laws of Sukkot. Well, guess what? 2 weeks ago, or was it last week, we were describing that there was 12 days, there was 7 days up till the 12th of Sivan, which are also Yemei Tashlumin, days of making up for a missed carbon for Shavuos. And the idea of having a second chance is not unique to the Karban Pesach. It's not all across the board, but there are many mitzvahs that if you missed one time, you get a second chance extended to a later time. And that's going to be our question. Number one is, why do we get so carried away with the second chance of Pesach? Don't we have it in other places? More importantly, why is the second chance a completely different calendar month? Why is it delayed for a full month? What's with this second chance business that it's created its own Yom Tov? It's been changed from a regular second chance. Oh, you've missed it. Don't worry, it's not too late. We can still catch it before the clock ticks. No, there's something else. For the second chance, we have a brand new Yom Tov established, created. We've made a new creative date called Pesach Sheni. Instead of just saying, it's not too late. Understand the difference? Sometimes you get late for a meeting and they tell you, don't worry, we waited for you. But when you get told, you know what, it's okay, you missed this meeting, but we're going to redo it. We're going to make a new one and it's going to be just for people like you. That's something else. That's Pesach Sheni. Hashem says, don't worry about it. You've missed it. And then actually it's too late. but we're going to create a second chance thing. It's going to be a brand new, separate, different calendar month, different idea, but it's going to be an establishment that will allow you to rectify something of the past. And that's unique about Pesach Sheni. It's different, and we're asking, why is this in a separate month? And why is this new Pesach Sheni not just doing whatever we would have done in Pesach Rishon? Why are there established differences that are going to highlight Pesach Sheni is not the same as Pesach Rishon? It's its own entity. So 2 pointers. Number one is it's in a separate calendar date. And number two, there are specific rules that are changed up to emphasize that Pesach Sheni is not just catch up. It's something separate. It's unique. And somehow that still makes up for Pesach Rishon. And then the third part of the question is what we started off with is Pesach Sheni is supposed to be for those who would have brought Pesach Rishon and they didn't. Well, we wouldn't have brought Pesach Rishon anyhow. So why are we celebrating Pesach Sheni? Isn't it only for people who missed Pesach Rishon? We didn't miss it because we didn't have anything to miss. Clearly, this new unique establishment called Pesach Sheni has something to it. More than just for those who were going to bring Pesach Rishon and didn't. And it's that part of it that we still mark to today, that we might discover if we notice what the things and the changes are, and we'll also be able to understand what Pesach Sheni talks to us if we notice the month in which Pesach Sheni is established in different to the calendar month of Pesach Rishon. And this is how the Sikh is going to help us appreciate that the lesson we're learning from this week's Parshah, what Hashem wants us to know about Pesach Sheni, is so relevant to us, even if we don't yet have the Beis Hamikdash, because it's not just about an offering, it's not just about a korban, it's about an approach to life that we need to know in our life. So let's do it inside. Okay, there's a few halachas. Usually in times of Beis Hamikdash, if most people in the community couldn't bring the first sacrifice, they all skipped it and lost the chance for a second one because you have to bring the korban Pesach, but this is not the case. Okay. What does the word sacrifice even mean? The Hebrew word korban doesn't just mean that you burn something, you offer it up. Korban actually means something else. Korban means to become close. Karev. Karevim are relatives. Karev means to be close, and a korban, a sacrifice, is come close to Hashem. And this korban that we're talking about here, this animal sacrifice, shows our inner work to get closer to Hashem, and it corresponds to, and it's supposed to be a message to us of being able to draw closer to Hashem by giving up bad temptations, by offering up that animalistic side of me, the side of me that doesn't behave so human, the animal side of me, and bringing that closer to Hashem. That's the concept of a korban. So in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, you would use a physical animal, and that physical animal coming into the spirituality of the Beis Hamikdash would empower our neshama to go on this journey. And then there'll be the idea if we missed the first korban Pesach, and there'll be a new establishment called Pesach Sheni. But let's read how it's supposed to work in an ideal world, and then how it works practically in now today's day and age, and more importantly, what the message is for us. So this is a quote from the Friedrich Rebbe. Let's explain the idea of sacrifices in our personal religious life. The verse states, when a person brings a sacrifice to Hashem from the cattle or from the sheep, from you is the offering to Hashem. From the cattle and sheep, from you is the offering to Hashem. And the Friedrich Rebbe is going to focus on that the offering comes from you, is the offering to Hashem. This verse is meant to clarify the overall concept of sacrifices in the soul's spiritual work. When a person brings, refers to a person coming close to Hashem, korban, stepping up. And from you is the offering to Hashem. The idea is that the sacrifice are not only about offering an animal, that's the expression. The meaning of it is rather about offering yourself, your own capacities and senses. I think this idea where a person has a weakness, whatever it might be, and that is brought closer to Hashem, that is the idea of bringing something from within me, my own capacities, my own senses, and drawing that closer to Hashem. The reference to from you means that the sacrifice comes from the person themselves. The animals mentioned from the cattle or from the sheep symbolize different levels of the animal soul, which are the inner capacities in a person's animal soul. As we know, the way to purify each person's animal soul varies. For some, the animal soul is wild and coarse, like an ox that gores, and very rough character traits. For others, the animal soul is softer, like a sheep, more refined, though still part of the animal nature, and maybe they need to step up and be less timid or whatever else it might be. But if there's something that's a weakness and doesn't allow me to thrive in my connection to Hashem, each person has their own animal, and that part of themselves must be brought purified to come closer to Hashem. That's what it means to have a carbon. So now, let's leave behind the carbon of the actual physical animal that was brought in the Beis Hamikdash, because as we said, we're looking at what the messaging for us is in today's day and age. We're now shifting to focus on the animal within me, whether it's a rough, wild, goring ox animal, or it's a timid, soft sheep animal, an animal all the same that needs to be refined. And that refinement comes in two stages: Pesach Rishon, Pesach Sheni. And what we're going to learn is that Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni, very important, are going to be two different movements. One is going to be the Sor Merah, refraining from the bad, eradicating evil traits. And the other one is going to be Asay Toiv, getting involved in doing the right thing. Which is first? Pesach Rishon is first Sor Merah. Pesach Sheni, in terms of personal growth, represents the shift from the first stage of the Exodus, the first Passover, which is in the first month, in Nisan, to the second stage, which is in the second month, in Iyar. And by noticing what each month represents, we'll better understand what the gift of Pesach Sheni tells us. This is the transition from the work of Sor Merah, avoiding evil, to a new, different line of work, Asay Tov, doing good. To explain further, the Exodus itself marks the beginning of this work, with Sor Merah being the act of leaving Egypt and escaping its evil. When we left Egypt, we didn't get anywhere yet. We just went cold turkey. We broke free from the constraints, from the shackles, from the evil of Egypt. As they discussed in the time, the Torah says, the people fled because at that time the evil within the soul of the Jewish people was still strong, and the main focus at the beginning was on Sor Merah, escaping the impurity of Egypt. Only after this first step could they move on to the next stage, Asay Tov, the work of doing good. So, Sor Merah is avoid evil. And from there, we graduate to the second month, which is Asay Tov, to do good. Passover is about leaving behind the bad and avoiding the evil, which then transitions to the second Pesach, where we actively do good and serve Hashem. To put into the terms of Kabbalah, which is very often quoted in Chassidus, the Aramaic word iskafia, which means to suppress, suppressing negativity, can eventually transition and mature into ishapcha, to transform the negativity to the next level. Passover, Pesach, and the first Pesach is about holding back the negativity, and the second Pesach is ishapcha, when we are ready now not only to stop doing the bad, but to do positive actions. And what we're learning here is that it takes a more mature approach to Yetzias Mitzrayim to be able to do ishapcha. We don't have time for all the quotes, but let's just say it takes a stronger power to be able to look at the bad habits that I have and think about how I can use those habits, those tendencies, those capacities to do something positive with them. Because transforming a trait within me that has brought me to all sorts of negativities and weaknesses, and then somehow find a way to channel that drive into doing something positive, that's advanced. That's level 2. The first step is, if I notice that I'm getting angry, is to figure out how to stop myself getting angry. And really, in the normative way, before I stop getting angry, all the kindness that I'm going to share and show to people is going to be overshadowed every time I give into the weakness of getting angry. And people are going to notice when I'm angry. They might not even notice that I'm trying to do good things because the anger is so loud. It's so negative. And therefore, the first step is stop the evil, break free. And the next step is to then fill in that void with something good.
Mm.
Then Hashem says that Pesach Sheni isn't the next day after Pesach Rishon. Pesach Sheni has become an entity unto itself. And now we understand why the Rebbe made such a big deal out of Pesach Sheni. Because Pesach Sheni is not just step two. Pesach Sheni is the service of an advanced stage. And therefore, if Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people as a whole, have journeyed in a trajectory that starts from the beginning of creation or starts from the beginning of Matan Torah, and we are now so close to Mashiach, to the destination, and we're being traveling along, we as a people have what it takes to jump into Asay Tov, to start doing good things as a people. It's not to deny that it's okay. We're not going to say it's okay to continue doing bad traits. We should really get rid of them. We shouldn't wait for that. And that explains why Pesach Sheni is marked today. It explains why Pesach Sheni is in the second month, the month of Iyar. And it also explains that his hapcha of turning over to become doing what the Eibishter wants is so important because we don't wait for negativity to stop. Instead, we jump into doing the positive, and whilst we're doing the positive, we can drag in the negativities, ending in the spirit of doing good things. So if we are upsetting people around us, we shouldn't do that. But don't wait to stop doing that before we do good things as well. This creation of Pesach Sheni shows us also that the only thing that Pesach Rishon is replicated by in Pesach Sheni is the actual offering. But everything else in Pesach Rishon was marked and celebrated by all the Jewish people. In simple English, the people who couldn't do the first Pesach offering still had to eat matzah on the first Pesach. They still had to make sure there's no chametz in their house on the first Pesach. Because the first step of Pesach is trying to do what you can. And if a person's impure and they can't bring the carbon, they should still do everything else. But they shouldn't worry. Because the second stage is still doable. And to us, who are Pesach Rishon, we weren't able to bring a carbon, we learn that message loud and clear. We don't say we don't have the ability to start doing positive. We say to ourselves, we do have the ability to start doing positive. Because Pesach Sheni in this week's Seder reminds us that it's a different month. It's a brand new creation. It's unique. It's a standalone. Because we have what it takes. Even if we messed up and there's no one else to blame, we can start being positive today. And when we do that, Hashem will surely fill us in and bring us back to the Beis Hamikdash. B'meses Hashem, b'mheru yameinu, we'll be able to do good things. And we will recognize that the second Pesach is the spiritual journey of every single Yid today. And when we are able to do that, Hashem will give us the blessings in every part of our journey, both in the Sur Mirah as well, and certainly in the Asay Tov to keep on doing good things. Yishakoyach for joining, and B'meses Hashem next week, same time, same place. Many simchas to all of Klal Yisrael, and should be real cherus amiti, freedom from any sorts of shackles. Thank you very much. Kol tov.
Thank you.